Jake Morrison stood in the command center and watched the screens show something that made his blood run cold. Thousands of alien ships waited just outside the solar system like hungry wolves ready to attack. The biggest ships were the size of small cities, and their weapons could turn planets into dust. Jake had fought in 3 wars before, but he had never seen anything like this. The message from the Galactic Council played again on the main screen. A tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms spoke in perfect English. His voice was calm, but his words carried death. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender completely, or every human world would burn. The alien said humans were too dangerous to live free in the galaxy. They called humans Deathworlders because Earth was so deadly that it made humans into something the galaxy feared. Lisa Ford walked into the room carrying a stack of reports. She commanded the Colonial Defense Force and had spent the last 10 years building up human defenses. Her face was pale as she looked at the numbers. The alien fleet had over 3,000 ships. Each one was stronger than the best human battleship. Their shields could stop nuclear weapons, and their guns could crack moons in half. Ryan Blake sat at the conference table with his hands folded. The old admiral had gray hair and scars from a dozen battles. He had seen humans fight impossible odds before, but nothing like this. The aliens had technology that was hundreds of years ahead of anything humans had built. They could travel between stars in days, while human ships took months. Their computers were smarter than human scientists, and their weapons used physics that humans barely understood. Amy Collins stood near the wall, looking at equations on her tablet. She was the scientist who had figured out how to make human ships travel faster than light. Her discovery had let humans spread to dozens of worlds in just 50 years. But now she stared at numbers that made no sense. The alien fleet was so powerful that fighting them would be like throwing rocks at a hurricane. The room filled with more officers as the emergency meeting began. Jake looked around at the faces of people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. They all knew the truth that nobody wanted to say out loud. If they fought the aliens, they would lose. If they surrendered, their children would grow up as slaves. There was no good choice left. Lisa spoke first, and her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. The alien fleet had enough firepower to destroy every human world 10 times over. Their fastest ships could reach Earth in 6 hours. Their weapons could punch through the strongest human armor like it was paper. She had run the battle simulations 100 times, and humans lost every single one. Ryan stood up and walked to the window that looked out at the stars. He had been fighting for 40 years and had never retreated from a battle. His ships had held the line at Proxima when alien raiders tried to destroy the first human colony. He had led the charge at Kepler when pirates threatened the mining stations. But this was different. This was not a battle they could win with courage and skill. Amy looked up from her tablet and shook her head. The math was clear and brutal. Even if every human ship in the galaxy joined the fight, they would still be outnumbered 50-1. The aliens had weapons that could destroy stars and shields that could stop anything humans could throw at them. Their computers could predict human tactics before humans even thought of them. The message from the Galactic Council played again. The alien spokesman explained that humans were a virus that needed to be contained. They said Earth was a that created monsters instead of civilized beings. Humans were too violent and too unpredictable to be allowed to spread across the galaxy. The council had voted, and the decision was final. Humanity would surrender or die. Jake felt anger rising in his chest as he listened to the aliens' words. They talked about humans like they were animals that needed to be caged. They said human violence was a disease that would infect the peaceful galaxy. But Jake knew the truth. Humans were not monsters. They were survivors. Earth had tried to kill them with ice ages and plagues and asteroids, but they had lived through it all. They had climbed out of caves and reached for the stars, because that was what humans did. The reports kept coming in from across human space. Every colony, and every station had received the same message. The aliens wanted complete surrender. Number. Human would be allowed to carry weapons. No human ship would be allowed to leave the systems where they already lived. Human children would be taken away to be raised by alien families. The human race would end not with fire, but with chains. Least, read the latest intelligence reports. The alien fleet was moving slowly toward Earth, like they had all the time in the world. Their formation was perfect, and their discipline was complete. They fought like machines that never made mistakes. But that might be their weakness. Humans had learned to fight on a world where everything wanted to kill them. They had learned to adapt and survive when the odds were impossible. Ryan turned back to the room, and his eyes were hard as steel. He had received messages from every human world, and the answer was the same everywhere. They would not surrender. They would not bow down to aliens who called them monsters. They would not let their children grow up as slaves. If the galaxy wanted to destroy humanity, they would have to pay a price that would make them remember this day forever. Amy closed her tablet and looked at the others. She had been working on something in her lab that might change everything. It was dangerous and untested, but it might be the key to victory. She had found a way to use human technology in ways the aliens had never imagined. It would take time and resources they did not have, but it might be their only hope. The meeting ended with a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity would not surrender. They would fight, even if it meant the end of everything. The message went out to every human world, and the response was immediate. Ships began moving toward Earth from every corner of human space. The Deathworlders were going to war. Ben Parker watched the screens in his command ship above Mars and felt his heart pound with excitement and fear. Ships were arriving from every corner of human space, and the sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Massive cargo haulers from the asteroid belt flew alongside sleek passenger liners from the outer colonies. Mining ships that had never fired a shot in anger moved next to warships that had fought pirates and raiders for years. The logistics of bringing together such a fleet should have been impossible. Ben had been coordinating space operations for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. Ships were arriving faster than his computers could track them. The orbital traffic control systems were screaming warnings as captains ignored safety protocols to get into position. Everyone knew that time was running out, and every minute counted. Kate Sullivan wiped sweat from her forehead as she worked in the orbital shipyards around Earth. The massive construction facilities that normally built one ship every 6 months were now working on dozens at the same time. Her teams had been working for 3 days straight, without sleep, as they stripped down holes and rebuilt them into weapons of war. Cargo ships were getting missile launchers welded to their sides. Passenger liners were having their luxury compartments replaced with armor plating. The work was dangerous and desperate. Kate's people were cutting corners and ignoring safety rules that had been written in blood over decades of space construction. They were installing weapon systems that were too heavy for the ships that carried them. They were pushing engines beyond their design limits. The ships they were building would not last long in battle, but they did not need to last long. They just needed to hit hard and fast. Tom Bradley stood in the center of the biggest factory complex on New Pittsburgh and watched his world transform before his eyes. The production lines that had made household goods and entertainment systems were now churning out missiles and railgun ammunition. His workers had volunteered for shifts that lasted 20 hours. They slept on cots next to their machines and ate meals without stopping work. The factory floors were filled with the sound of hammers and welders as humans built the tools of war with their own hands. Tom had fought in the corporate wars 30 years ago, and he knew what it meant to face superior firepower. But he also knew that humans had something the aliens did not understand. They had the ability to work together when everything was on the line. They had the willingness to sacrifice everything for their children and their future. Amy Collins worked in her laboratory deep under the surface of Luna, surrounded by alien technology that human soldiers had captured in previous battles. The fragments of weapons and armor told a story that most humans did not know. The aliens were not as advanced as they claimed to be. Their technology was powerful, but it was also old and rigid. They had not innovated in centuries because they did not need to. Amy had been studying the alien materials for months before the ultimatum came. She had discovered that their shields worked by deflecting energy in patterns that were mathematically perfect. But humans did not think in perfect patterns. Human weapons were crude and unpredictable. That might be the key to victory. If she could modify human nuclear weapons to behave in ways the aliens had never seen before, their perfect shields might not be so perfect after all. The breakthrough came when Amy realized that human technology was not inferior to alien technology. It was just different. Humans had learned to build things that could survive in environments that would destroy alien equipment. Earth weapons were designed to work in gravity wells and magnetic fields and radiation that would shut down alien systems. If she could combine human durability with alien precision, she might create something that neither side could have built alone. Ben received reports from across the solar system as the human fleet continued to grow. Ships were arriving from colonies that most people had forgotten existed. Ancient freighters that should have been scrapped decades ago flew alongside prototype warships that had never been tested in battle. The fleet was a collection of everything humanity had ever built that could fly and fight. The alien fleet waited beyond the edge of the solar system like a wall of death. Their ships moved in perfect formation without a single vessel out of place. Their weapons were charged and ready. Their shields were at full power. They had fought 100 wars and conquered a dozen species. They had never lost a battle, and they did not expect to lose this one. Kate finished installing the last weapon system on a converted mining ship and stepped back to look at her work. The vessel had been designed to crack asteroids and extract minerals. Now it carried enough firepower to level a city. The ship was ugly and crude, but it would fight. That was all that mattered. She had turned garbage haulers into battleships and luxury yachts into carriers. The fleet would not win any beauty contests, but it would make the aliens pay for every inch of space. Tom received word that the last factory on New Pittsburgh had been converted to military production. Every manufacturing facility in human space was now making weapons and ammunition. The civilian economy had stopped completely as everyone focused on the war effort. There would be shortages and hardships for years after the battle, but that was a problem for later. Right now, the only thing that mattered was building enough weapons to hurt the aliens. Amy looked at the prototype weapon in her laboratory and felt a mixture of pride and terror. She had created something that violated every rule of physics that humans thought they understood. The device would phase through alien shields as if they were not there. It would deliver nuclear fire directly into the heart of alien ships. But it was untested and dangerous. If it failed, the human fleet would be destroyed. If it worked, it might change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Ben sent the final message to all human ships. The fleet was as ready as it would ever be. They had ships from every world and weapons from every factory. They had volunteers who had never seen battle and veterans who had fought in a dozen wars. They had mining equipment and scientific instruments that had been turned into weapons. It was not the fleet that humanity had planned to build, but it was the fleet that humanity had. The countdown began as the alien ultimatum approached its deadline. In 72 hours, the most powerful fleet in galactic history would meet the most desperate fleet that humanity had ever assembled. The aliens expected an easy victory over primitive Deathworlders, but they had never fought humans who had nothing left to lose. They had never faced a species that had learned to survive on a world that tried to kill them every day. The battle would begin soon, and the galaxy would never be the same. The 72 hours were over, and Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the alien fleet move toward Earth like a storm of death and metal. Their ships gleamed in the sunlight with hulls that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved in perfect formation without a single vessel out of place. Their weapons were already charging with energies that made the space around them shimmer with heat. Jake Morrison gripped the railings of his command chair aboard the hastily converted battleship New Defiance. The ship had been a cargo hauler just days ago, but now it carried enough weapons to fight a small war. Around him, the bridge crew worked at stations that had been welded into place by workers who had never built a warship before. Everything about the ship was wrong by military standards, but it was what they had. The first shots came from the alien fleet like spears of light that crossed the void in seconds. Human ships exploded in flowers of fire and metal as the alien weapons found their targets. The converted freighter Golden Hope vanished in a ball of plasma that lit up the darkness. The mining ship Rock Crusher broke apart as alien beams cut through its hull like paper. In the first minute of battle, humanity lost 50 ships, but the humans did not retreat. They charged forward into the alien fire like their ancestors had charged into machine gun nests and artillery barrages. The Deathworlders had learned long ago that sometimes the only way to survive was to run toward the thing that wanted to kill you. They flew their crude ships into the perfect alien formation and began to fight with a fury that shocked their enemies. Lisa Ford led a squadron of converted passenger liners against one of the alien command ships. Her vessels were not built for war, but they were crewed by humans who had grown up on worlds where everything tried to kill them. They used tactics that no civilized species would attempt. When their weapons failed, they rammed their ships into alien hulls. When their ships were crippled, they set off their reactors. Next to enemy vessels, the alien commander Admiral Zeftai watched the battle from his flagship and felt something he had never experienced before. The humans were not fighting like any species he had ever encountered. They did not retreat when they were outnumbered. They did not surrender when their ships were destroyed. They fought with a combination of intelligence and madness that made no sense to his strategic computers. Jake watched his tactical display as human ships died around him, but he also saw something that gave him hope. The aliens were taking damage. Their perfect shields were holding against human weapons, but the constant barrage was wearing them down. More importantly, the humans were learning. Every ship that died taught the survivors something new about alien weaknesses. The battle raged for hours as both fleets hammered each other with weapons that could destroy worlds. The aliens had expected to sweep aside human resistance in minutes, but instead they found themselves locked in a brutal slugging match. Their advanced technology was winning, but it was not winning fast enough. The humans were adapting their tactics in real time and turning their disadvantages into unexpected advantages. Kate Sullivan worked in the engineering section of a battleship that was held together by determination and welding wire. Around her, damage control teams fought fires and sealed hull breaches while the ship continued to fight. She had never been in a space battle before, but she was learning fast. When the primary power failed, she rerouted energy through systems that were never meant to carry it. When the weapons overheated, she cooled them with liquid nitrogen from the life support systems. Ben Parker coordinated the battle from his command ship and watched as the impossible began to happen. The alien fleet was actually slowing down. Their perfect formation was starting to crack as human ships punched holes in their lines. The Deathworlders were dying by the thousands, but they were making the aliens pay for every victory. Tom Bradley had joined the crew of a converted factory ship that was now fighting in the front lines. The vessel had been built to manufacture consumer goods, but now it launched missiles and fired railguns at alien warships. He worked at a weapon station that had been installed just days ago and felt the ship shake every time the guns fired. Around him, young workers who had never seen war-operated weapons. They had built with their own hands. Amy Collins watched from her laboratory as the first test of her secret weapon began. A squadron of human ships had been equipped with her modified nuclear warheads. The weapons looked crude compared to alien technology, but they had been designed to do something that should have been impossible. They would phase through alien shields and deliver their payload directly into enemy hulls. The moment came when the first modified warhead struck an alien dreadnought. The massive ship had shields that could stop any known weapon but the human. Missile passed through them like they were not there. The nuclear explosion that followed lit up space like a small sun. When the light faded, the alien ship was gone and the impossible had become reality. Jake felt his heart race as he watched more alien ships die to Amy's weapons. The modified warheads were working better than anyone had dared to hope. The aliens were screaming warnings to their fleet, but their perfect technology had no answer to human ingenuity. Their shields were useless against weapons that ignored the laws of physics as they understood them. The alien fleet began to pull back for the first time in the battle. Admiral Zefdai stared at his tactical displays and tried to understand what was happening. His fleet was losing ships to primitive weapons that should not have been able to harm them. The humans were fighting with technology that made no sense and tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Lisa watched as her squadron finally broke through the alien defensive line. Her ships were damaged and her crew was exhausted, but they had proven something that the galaxy thought was impossible. Deathworlders could fight superior technology and win. They could take massive casualties and keep fighting. They could adapt and survive when any other species would have surrendered. The battle continued through the night as both fleets traded blows that shook the fabric of space itself. The aliens were still winning, but they were no longer certain of victory. The humans were still dying, but they were no longer helpless. Something had changed in the void between Earth and the alien fleet. The balance of power was shifting and the galaxy would never be the same. Ryan Blake stood on his bridge and watched as human ships continued to charge into alien fire. They were not the most advanced fleet in the galaxy, but they were the most determined. They had learned to fight on a world that had tried to kill them every day of their lives. Now they were teaching the galaxy what it meant to face creatures that refused to give up. The Deathworlders were at war, and nothing would ever stop them again. The impossible was happening, and Admiral Zefdai could not believe what his sensors were telling him. His fleet was retreating. The most powerful armada in galactic history was pulling back from a battle with primitive Deathworlders who should have been wiped out in the first hour of fighting. His command ship shuddered as another human missile exploded against its shields, and he felt something he had never experienced before: fear. Ryan Blake watched his tactical display and felt his heart pound with excitement and disbelief. The alien fleet was actually moving away from Earth. Their perfect formation was breaking apart as human ships pressed their attack. The Deathworlders had done something that galactic military doctrine said was impossible. They had fought a technologically superior force to a standstill, and now they were winning. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his battered ship and surveyed the damage around him. Half his crew was dead or wounded, and his weapons were nearly out of ammunition. But the aliens were running, and that was all that mattered. He had seen human ships die by the hundreds, but he had also seen them take impossible risks that paid off. The humans were not just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for their right to exist in a galaxy that wanted them gone. Ben Parker coordinated the pursuit from his command ship and marveled at what his people had accomplished. The logistics of the battle should have been impossible, but somehow his crews had kept the fleet supplied and organized. Human ships that had been held together with hope and welding wire were now chasing the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. The miners and factory workers who had volunteered for this war were proving that courage could overcome technology. Kate Sullivan worked in the engineering section of her ship and realized that something fundamental had changed. The aliens were not adapting to human tactics the way humans had adapted to alien weapons. Their technology was so advanced that they had forgotten how to improvise. When their systems failed, they could not fix them with spare parts and determination, the way humans could. They had become dependent on perfection, and humans were anything but perfect. The human fleet pressed forward like a pack of wolves chasing wounded prey. Their ships were crude, and their weapons were primitive, but they were crude by people who had learned to survive in conditions that would kill any other species. They used tactics that no civilized military would attempt. They turned their weaknesses into strengths, and their desperation into a weapon that the aliens could not counter. Admiral Zeftai tried to understand what had gone wrong with his perfect plan. His fleet had every advantage that technology could provide. His ships were faster and stronger, and more heavily armed than anything the humans possessed. His crews were trained and disciplined and experienced, but the humans fought with a combination of intelligence and madness that his strategic computers could not predict or counter. Lisa Ford led her squadron in a flanking attack that should have been suicide but somehow worked. Her ships were damaged and her weapons were failing, but her crew refused to give up. They had grown up on colony worlds, where failure meant death, and they had learned to fight with whatever tools they had. When their missiles ran out, they used their ships as weapons. When their ships were crippled, they found ways to keep fighting. The alien fleet tried to regroup, but the humans would not let them. Every time the aliens tried to form a defensive line, human ships would punch through it with suicidal attacks that defied all military logic. The Deathworlders were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like the survivors of a world that had tried to kill them every day of their lives. Amy Collins watched the battle from her laboratory and felt a mixture of pride and terror. Her modified weapons were working better than she had ever hoped. The combination of human ingenuity and alien technology was creating effects that neither side should have been able to achieve alone. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The aliens would not accept this defeat. They would return with larger fleets and more advanced weapons. Tom Bradley fired his weapons at an alien cruiser and watched it explode in a ball of plasma. He had been a factory supervisor just days ago, but now he was fighting in the greatest battle in human history. Around him, other civilians who had never seen combat-operated weapons they had built with their own hands. They were not soldiers, but they were fighting for their families and their future, and that made them dangerous. The alien formation finally broke completely as human ships swarmed over them like insects attacking a giant. The perfect discipline that had won 100 wars was useless against enemies who did not follow the rules of civilized warfare. The humans fought with a ferocity that violated every principle of galactic military doctrine. They used ramming, attacks and suicide runs and tactics that made no sense to alien commanders. Jake watched as one of the massive alien dreadnoughts tried to escape, but was surrounded by human ships. The vessel was 10 times larger than anything in the human fleet, but it was alone and outnumbered. The human ships attacked it from all sides, with weapons that should not have been able to penetrate its defenses. But Amy's modified warheads were ignoring the alien shields and delivering nuclear fire directly into the ship's hull. The dreadnought exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from Earth. The destruction of such a massive vessel sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. They had never lost a ship that large to primitive weapons. The humans were not just winning the battle. They were proving that the entire foundation of galactic military power was built on assumptions that were wrong. Ben received reports from across the battlefield as the alien retreat turned into a rout. Enemy ships were abandoning their formation and fleeing in all directions. The humans were pursuing them with a determination that bordered on madness. Mining ships that had been converted to warships were chasing alien cruisers across star systems. The hunters had become the hunted, and the roles were completely reversed. Kate felt her ship shake as it accelerated beyond its design limits in pursuit of fleeing aliens. The engines were overheating, and the hull was cracking, but nobody cared. They had proven that humans could fight the most advanced species in the galaxy and win. They had shown that courage and determination could overcome any technological advantage. The Deathworlders were no longer the victims in this war. Admiral Zefti watched his fleet disintegrate and tried to send a warning to the Galactic Council. The humans were not the primitive savages they had been told about. They were something far more dangerous. They were a species that had learned to survive on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had turned their harsh environment into a weapon and their desperation into a strength that could not be defeated. The battle ended with the alien fleet scattered and broken. The humans had paid a terrible price for their victory, but they had proven something that would change the galaxy forever. The Deathworlders were not going to surrender. They were not going to accept slavery. They were going to fight for their right to exist, and they were going to win. The message went out across human space like wildfire. The fleet was moving, and nothing could stop it now. The alien fleet was broken and scattered, but Ryan Blake knew the war was far from over. The Galactic Council would not accept this humiliation. They would gather larger fleets and more advanced weapons and return with the determination to wipe humanity from the galaxy completely. But something fundamental had changed in the void between Earth and the fleeing alien ships. The Deathworlders were no longer the hunted. They had become the hunters. Jake Morrison led the pursuit as human ships chased the retreating aliens across multiple star systems. The roles had completely reversed from the beginning of the battle. Now, it was the advanced galactic civilization that was running from primitive Deathworlders. Every system they passed through received the same message broadcast on all frequencies. Humanity was not the victim in this war anymore. They were the force that would reshape the galaxy. The human fleet had transformed during the battle from a desperate collection of converted civilian ships into something that struck fear into the hearts of alien commanders. Mining vessels that had been retrofitted with weapons were now hunting alien cruisers through asteroid fields. Passenger liners that had been converted to carriers were launching fighters that could match anything the aliens had. The fleet was crude and ugly, but it was effective in ways that terrified their enemies. Ben Parker established supply lines that stretched across dozens of star systems as the human fleet pushed deeper into alien territory. His logistics teams had learned to operate in conditions that would have shut down any civilized military. They scavenged parts from destroyed alien ships and used them to repair human vessels. They turned captured alien technology into weapons that could be used by human crews. The Deathworlders were adapting faster than their enemies could respond. Amy Collins worked in a mobile laboratory aboard one of the fleet's command ships and continued to unlock the secrets of alien technology. Every battle brought new prizes in the form of damaged alien equipment that could be reverse engineered. She had discovered that the combination of human ingenuity and alien science created possibilities that neither side could have achieved alone. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous thing about Deathworlders was not their aggression, but their ability to learn and adapt. Kate Sullivan found herself in command of a captured alien facility that had been converted into a human shipyard. The complex had been designed to build the most advanced vessels in the galaxy, but now it was producing hybrid ships that combined human durability with alien technology. The new vessels were faster and stronger than anything humanity had built before, but they retained the flexibility and adaptability that made human ships so dangerous. Tom Bradley stood on the bridge of a ship that had been built from parts of a dozen different alien vessels. The hybrid design should not have worked, but human engineers had found ways to make incompatible technologies work together. The ship was a patchwork of human and alien systems, but it was more powerful than either side could have created alone. The Deathworlders were not just winning the war, they were changing the nature of warfare itself. Lisa Ford established the first permanent human base in enemy territory on a world that had been a major alien military installation. The fortified system would serve as a staging ground for future operations and a symbol of human determination. The aliens had tried to stop human expansion before it could begin, but instead, they had given humanity the greatest gift possible. They had provided a common enemy and the technology to fight them. The news of the human victory spread through the galaxy on channels that the Galactic Council could not control. Species that had been oppressed by the Galactic Order for centuries began to whisper of rebellion. The Deathworlders had proven that the Council's military might was not invincible. They had shown that superior technology could be defeated by superior determination. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would not end until every world was free. Admiral Zevtai sent desperate messages to the Galactic Council, warning them about the true nature of the human threat. The Deathworlders were not just another species that could be conquered with overwhelming force. They were something that the galaxy had never encountered before. They were a species that had learned to thrive in conditions that would destroy any other form of life. They had turned their harsh world into a weapon, and their desperation into a strength that could not be defeated. Jake received reports from human colonies that had been liberated from alien control. The populations were celebrating their freedom, but they were also preparing for the counterattack that would surely come. The humans had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The Galactic Council would not accept the loss of their authority. They would return with everything they had and try to crush the human rebellion before it could spread. Ben coordinated the distribution of captured alien technology to human worlds throughout the galaxy. The weapons and equipment that had been designed to destroy humanity were now being used to defend human colonies. The irony was not lost on anyone. The aliens had brought the tools of their own destruction to the very people they had tried to eliminate. The Deathworlders were turning their enemies' strengths against them. Amy made another breakthrough in her research that would change the balance of power forever. She had discovered how to modify human industrial equipment to produce weapons that were more effective than anything the aliens had ever built. The combination of human manufacturing techniques and alien materials created possibilities that neither side had imagined. The galaxy was about to discover that Deathworlders were not just good at fighting, they were good at building things that could win wars. Kate supervised the construction of the first ships that had been designed from the beginning to use both human and alien technology. The vessels were beautiful and deadly and completely unlike anything that had ever been built before. They combined human innovation with alien precision to create weapons of war that were perfectly suited to fight. In the new galaxy that was emerging from the ashes of the old order, Tom trained crews from dozens of different human worlds to operate the new hybrid ships. The people who volunteered came from mining stations and farming colonies and manufacturing centers. They were not professional soldiers, but they were humans who had learned to survive in conditions that would kill any other species. They brought with them the same determination that had won the first battle, and they were ready to carry the war to every corner of the galaxy. Lisa received intelligence reports that confirmed what everyone already knew. The Galactic Council was preparing a massive counterattack that would involve every species in their alliance. They were building fleets that would dwarf anything that had ever been assembled before, but the humans were ready for them. The Deathworlders had tasted victory, and they would not give it up. They had proven that they could fight the most advanced species in the galaxy and win. Now, they were going to prove that nothing could stop them. The human fleet moved deeper into galactic space, carrying a message that would be heard on every world. The Deathworlders were coming, and they would not be stopped. They had been forced into this war by aliens who thought they were too dangerous to live free. Now they were going to show the galaxy what Deathworlders could really do when they were given no choice but to fight. The age of human dominance had begun, and it would not end until every species was free to choose its own destiny. The fleet was moving, and nothing could stop it now.